Hey guys, okay, so today we're going to be going back to China. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so if you look on here, I've got a really detailed thing that goes through all of the dynasties and basically gives Chinese history in a nutshell. But if I were you, I would go back, watch that lovely video that we watched last semester of the Chinese dynasty song. How fun! So today we're going to be talking about the Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties. So these are going to be dynasties that are going to last from about the 1200s in the time of the Mongols during the Yuan dynasty all the way to 1661. So we're getting pretty close to modern history. Okay, so in the Yuan dynasty, around 1368, the Chinese drove out those Mongol rulers in that dynasty. And they're going to start with this Ming dynasty, which is only a government that allowed to trade with foreigners to limit outside cultural influence. So they're only trading with the government, and nobody else can trade. And that's, again, kind of like when we were talking about Japan in the last video, trying to keep everything isolated. The Ming dynasty is going to want to keep the people isolated as well, for kind of the same reasons. It's also going to see a return to Confucianism, as well as the civil service exam, which we talked about last semester. And the Ming dynasty, for the most part, is going to be a pretty stable, prosperous time. So during the Ming dynasty, you had that guy we talked about last unit, known as Zhang He. And I told you we'll talk about him a little bit more this unit. Well, here we go. So Zhang He is going to be a guy exploring for the Ming dynasty. And Zhang He, one of his things he was trying to do, he was trying to outsmart the Europeans and say, wow, look, China's got better explorers than the Europeans. So this is just a funny ad that I found that they used back then, where they would show a picture of Columbus's ship, and then Zhang He's ship, be like, haha, my ship's bigger than your ship. And this is also trying to show off the dynasty's power over the Europeans. So that's the main thing you need to know about the Ming dynasty. You had these explorers, it was a pretty prosperous time, you brought back Confucianism, and you had the civil service exam. But then you have the Qing dynasty. So by 1600, the Ming dynasty weakened due to inflation, debt, and political corruption. And you had this guy named the Manchus who took over in 1644. And the Manchus is going to establish the Qing dynasty, which upholds Chinese traditions and gradually became accepted even though they were foreigners. So it's going to be this time where you get this new group of people known as the Manchus coming in, and they're trying to start their own rule in China. And it took a while, but eventually they're going to get accepted. So this is just a funny thing I found on men's hair in Chinese history and how it affects politics. Okay, so for instance, in the Ming dynasty, having long, uncut, and bound hair, and you guys better pay attention, the man bun. Okay, so the man bun says that you have social control, filial piety, culturalism, and virility. So you're like a long-living, very stable kind of guy. Versus, if you don't have the man bun and you cut your hair, it means that you're antisocial, you don't respect your parents, you're uncivilized, and you're a barbarian. So, ladies, you need to find someone who has a man bun because Chinese history tells you so, okay? And then let's move on to the Qing dynasty, where they had the hair down and more like in a little ponytail thing going on. So again, this one, it was good because it would show social control and this symbol of submission to Manchurian or the leader's authority. So, okay, they're doing good and they're following the rules, but having like full or short hair means you're really antisocial and you're treacherous and you're going against the government, which means you need to be executed. So you better have that long hair. So yet again with the man bun, this is reason after reason man buns are a good thing. And then later when we get to the Republic of China, which we'll get to way later on in like the 1950s, that's when they started the short hair thing, and they believed at that point short hair meant social control, that you were national, that you were liberated from the Manchu oppression, and that you were more westernized like those Europeans. So Europeans don't do man buns. Everyone else likes the man bun, okay? Just so we got that under control here. Okay, so back to world history though. So Kangxi became the emperor in 1661, and he's going to rule for 60 years. And one of the things that he's going to do, he and his grandson, Zanlong, are going to do three very important things. One, they're going to lower taxes and government spending. Two, they're going to expand the border of China. And three, they're going to increase China's status and its prosperity. Okay? So during this time, again, China's kind of isolated just like Japan, and these European countries are going to really want to trade with China. But China just didn't really need their goods because they thought they were culturally superior to the Europeans. They said, you know what, we may be isolated, but we know a lot more than these Europeans do, and we're going to keep all our knowledge hidden within China, and we're not going to share it with anybody. And it's going to lead to this time of cultural isolation, where they're keeping everything hidden and within themselves. So during the Ming Dynasty, you have improved agricultural techniques, and that's going to lead to a huge population growth. And you're going to have different crop techniques like terracing, the champa rice, crop rotation, and the fish and patties. So during this time, since you've got all this agriculture going on, the Chinese said, we need to have more sons who are going to be able to provide food and land for the family. They're going to be able to really work the land. And since they really wanted these sons, this is going to lead to this thing known as the one-child policy. And this is going to get a little bit more into modern history for a second. But this idea of one-child policy, basically, it's this idea of that you should only have one child, and it should be a son who can work the land and provide for your family. And they saw girls as second-class citizens. So I've got a couple slides here. This comes from an advertisement that came out back then. So this is, again, talking about some of the different rule, which, again, is going to be this guy named Mao Zedong. We'll get into him a lot more in the 1950s. But basically the way the one-child policy worked, couples were encouraged to only have one child, as the policy state. But if that child's a girl, you're allowed to have a second child in the hopes you can have a son. Because, again, girls were not seen as someone who would work the land and do things to provide for their family. So if you have your second child, whether it's a son or daughter, that's it. You can't have any more after 2. And if you don't follow these rules, here's some things that could happen, some pressures from the Chinese government. So they might give you higher wages. They might give you, if you do it, they'll give you higher wages. They'll give you interest-free loans. You'll be able to get some more retirement funds. So you don't have to work as long. And then you get priority housing and priority schools. So you get to pick the best schools and the best houses. But if you don't do what they say, then you get fined from the equivalent of about $370 to about $12,000, like a lot of money. You also get a lot of pressures to have an abortion, pressures to have your belongings confiscated, and you can also easily get fired from work if you choose to not follow this rule. So 25% of these Chinese women of this reproductive age are going to end up actually having abortions because of this rule. So they do have some exceptions to the laws. So, like, families living in rural areas, they can have as many as they want. Children born overseas, okay, well, they're not Chinese citizens, okay. Minorities don't have to have they can have more than one children, they're fine. Disabled children, and parents who work in high-risk occupations. So, there were some exceptions, but for the most part, yeah, you couldn't have more than 1, maybe 2 children if your first child was a girl. Alright, so that's all I have for you guys today. Next time, we'll be talking about the gunpowder empires. Alright, see you next time. Bye!